say, but also different because I was training professionals, adults, who came in to want to do business through sales. And then I went into selling houses. I did training for that. And then I got invited to join a newspaper to become a writer about property. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know anything about this. I really don't know anything about this. What makes me think I can write? And the person who asked me, who wanted to employ me, said, well, if you can talk like this, I think you can write. I think your English is quite good, lah. I'm like, okay, lah. I did get, good prizes, top prizes for English in school. So I went. I joined the media, and there was no looking back. And I remained in the media for 10 years. And I always tell people, I was the person who did not like change. I was the person who, if I had to sell my car, I'd get like very upset and stressed out about getting used to a new car. If I had to move house, I would sit in the old house and cry at leaving those memories behind and going somewhere else. So I was a creature of habit. And here I was just changing professions 3 times in my life. So when the pandemic hit, I said to myself, oh my God, we'll have to do everything virtually now. I am like you, Jamuna, in my element in the classroom. I go there, I tell stories, I jump around. I think Christine, who's one of our participants here, she knows, she's seen me in action. I've done work with her in Sarawak, and I love that. I love going in, the interaction, the energy of having a crowd. And so now I had to pivot and do everything online. How do I make myself come across well online? How do I excite people? And I was clueless. For a minute, I was frozen. But then I said to myself, if I'm going to try and figure everything out from not knowing anything, I'm just going to break down and I'm going to get depressed and I'm going to, go into this slump. There's no business. There's no classroom training going on. People are, even companies are going into this, oh my God, what do we do? How do we convince our people to go online? They don't even know how to get into Zoom. They don't know what's Zoom, right? So that was us before. I mean, I knew what Zoom because I attended meetings, but set up a platform, invite people, all of that was new. But I said to myself, this is inevitable. If you can't fight it, you need to follow and get on board. And so I just started somewhere. I started doing videos, I started doing webinars, I started doing forums, and I started getting, familiar with all these platforms. And then I said, okay, I need to learn how to do training online effectively, right? Just the sheer force of my personality is not going to work. So, and that's where, thankfully, Jamuna, you came in and introduced me. And Jamuna, you and I are together on a course now, learning how to be good virtual trainers. Yes. So this whole story is about, you're never too old to learn. You're never too old to pivot. You must never say, I cannot change. You always must change because that's the only constant. Okay. So I think I've given you a lot of my background and what's happened during this MCO. So there is always a silver cloud in every lining. What this MCO has forced us to do is get us out of our comfort zones because we were all stuck there and saying this is the way it's going to be until I die. But no, we all have to constantly reinvent ourselves. We have to learn to do things the new way. We've got to become fresh in our approach to all the different things, even birthday parties, even socializing, right? Let alone our profession.
Yes, even celebrating the arrival of a little baby.
Yes, my grandchild. Just got a brand new grandchild.
Congratulations, yeah. Sheila. She's like the hip-hop grandma, glamma, not grandma.
Thank you so much.
So Sheila, now we are zooming into the storytelling that you would like to tell us. First is that we were taught that storytelling means that we are beating around the bush, or the assumption that you're not being professional. We were told to have an intro body, what do you want to say, and that's it. So how different would storytelling be to create that impact in a business context or in a corporate context?
Okay, I'm going to throw back a question at you here, Jamuna. You do a presentation skills workshop, right? You've been for presentations. You've been for great presentations, and you've been for presentations where after 10 minutes you say, what the hell am I doing here? Wasting my time. I want to run out, right?
You're not going to mention who I complained to you about.
No, I'm not going to complain, but I have been to presentations like that. All right, what were they doing? They were spewing out facts and figures. They were using just PowerPoint slides, and that was it. Now tell me, would you have benefited from such a presentation?
No.
I once attended, and this is where I learned, when I did my NLP Master Practitioner training in Sydney, I did it with someone called Sid Jacobson. It was a 12-day workshop, Jamana, and throughout the workshop, I think he used all of 10 slides, and he played about half a dozen videos. And the rest of the entire program was stories after stories after stories, stories within stories. Now, I'm not an auditory person, okay? I'm more visual. But I sat riveted, and I said, there's something to be said about storytelling. And I began to realize, as I listened to people talk, I began to realize it's the people with the stories that usually capture attention, that usually are able to influence other people, impact other people. Now, you do sales training, I do sales training. And you know the person in the salesperson who comes and tells me a story to illustrate something, rather than just say, okay, this is a great product, you need to buy it, these are the benefits, these are the features. That's not going to cut it, because we are all totally clued in. We know how to go online today and get all our facts and figures. Okay, we know how to read a PowerPoint deck, we know how to read PDF copies and all that. So, and some people, sometimes when I go for a presentation or a meeting, I say, why don't you just tell me the document? Because you're so boring, I can just read it, and you're not convincing me anyway. Okay, so I want to quote something by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. He wrote the book, The Little Prince. He said this: if you want to build a ship, basically if you want to get people, enlist people to build a ship, don't drum up to people to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work and give them a process and, you know, a document on how to build a ship, timelines and all. If you want to convince them to come on board and build a ship with you, you want to be not teaching them and telling them all this, but you want to teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. And that's a story there. So when I was a journalist, I was writing for Options. I went from business journalism to lifestyle journalism. So I used to write for Options, and I used to do food reviews. My God, that was just so exciting. I got to go and eat food and enjoy all the amazing food. And somebody came back to, and the people who own the restaurants would come back and say to me, Sheila, I should have been prepared for that food review, because the magazine would come out on a Saturday. And by Sunday, Monday, people will be crowding out the restaurants. And I thought, wow, am I such a good writer? No, because it was the story. It was the descriptive part of the story. I didn't just write, oh, my friends and I went and ate this and we had these ribs and they were very good. It was building that narrative around the experience that really convinced people. So in the corporate world, we think we have to be very cerebral. We must focus on facts and figures because it's all about IQ. But I ask you something, Jamuna, you just last year bought a car, right? It's an amazing car, right?
Sheila, we are live, okay?
That's okay.
I usually have about 1,000 views.
Yes, but you are very hardworking and you deserve to buy that car. Now I want to ask you one question. Did you buy that car based merely on facts and figures, how much mileage you get out of it, and you know what's the resale value? Or what was the reason you bought that car, Jamuna?
To take my family in the car, and we have a comfortable car, and
that's all facts. Okay?
Yeah.
Why did you buy that car in that color, Jamuna? How did you feel about it? What was it that the car did for you?
The kind of confidence that I can afford this, and I'm worth having this bigger, nicer, a bit pricier car, a bit.
And what was that all about? That was about the emotional connection you had with the car.
Yes, the emotional connection, yeah.
Let's not run away from the fact that when we make decisions to buy or to do something or to be influenced into doing something, it's usually because there's an emotional connect. And then we use the facts and figures to support that. All right. So when we are here, I want to bring into I want to bring to you the concept of 3 components of persuasion. Okay, this is what I think it was Aristotle who came up with it, and he said there are 3 components of persuasion. There is the logos, the ethos, and the pathos. The logos is the data, facts, and figures and research that you use to support an argument, to support whatever you're selling or trying to get people to buy into or convince people about. The ethos is the personal credibility you have. How believable are you when you're talking about this thing? Okay, do you really know what you're talking about? And the third component is pathos. Pathos is how you appeal to an audience's emotions. Now, for a long, long time, the corporate sector, we always thought that it was the ethos and the logos, how much facts and figures we throw into a presentation. So you go and look at business presentations, and then you come out and your head is reeling because there's like, there's a 10 by 10 columns, 10 rows there, and there's full of figures inside that, figures and graphs. And after a while, you just zone out. All right, and then people come and talk about themselves, their credentials, their credibility. I'm not saying all of that's not important. It is important. But if you just have the logos and the ethos, the facts and the credibility without the story, the pathos, the emotional connection, then there's no soul in what you're saying. Why would people want to be convinced to come on board with whatever it is that you're talking about? At the same time, if you just use pathos, just tell stories after stories after stories, but you don't have substance, you don't have facts and figures to back it, then it becomes very fluffy. Maybe that's why people say there's no place for stories in the corporate sector, because, some people might have just come and told you fluffy stories without giving you any substance, facts to back it up. Do you agree with me?
Yes, I agree with you. In fact, right, Sheila, there are programs known as storytelling for leaders, storytelling for business organizers. So it is a word that is very much, spoken about. Sheila, let's zoom in into now. A lot of people are onto digital marketing platform, including yourself. We are there, online presence. So how do we tell our story at the online presence? For example, that I'm someone who's baking a cake and I want to sell the cake. Then me just posting about the cake and the price, could you give an example on how she can narrate the story about the cake and eventually she wants to sell the cake?
In every story that you tell, you must have a big idea. I want to tell about something, because what is the purpose of telling the story? So you want to tell the story about the cake because you want to get people to smell the cake. You want to get people to actually imagine they are tasting that cake. You want to build a rich sensory experience so that when they look at the cake, they're looking at it and they're saying, oh my, it looks good, but I want to be able to know more about the smell and the taste of the cake. And what is this? Why this cake? Why not some fancy cake at some fancy restaurant? Why would I want to buy your cake online based just on your story? So if you craft and tell the story well enough, people will be led, influenced to come in and try your cake. Now look at you, Jamuna. Okay, 2 years ago, you were like, okay, you didn't have much of an online presence. And today you're one of the, 100 LinkedIn icons. You are out there. I mean, you're more out there than a lot of people, and that takes a lot of hard work. But what is the story that you can sell to people? It's not about, hey, I'm one of the 100 icons, I'm very good at social media. And everyone who is not, they will go like, yeah, you're so good. I can't be you and I don't listen to you anymore. But if you went and said, hey, once upon a time I was like you, I didn't know anything about social media, but somewhere inside of me, I realized I saw other people doing it and I said, hey, I want to be able to do that. So I went for a course and I signed up and I learned everything. And then, today it's a lot of hard work. I put in a lot of hard work, but I didn't just start there suddenly overnight become a LinkedIn icon. It was a process. And now I went through that process. I know what it involves and I can help you to do that. Now that's a story.
Wow, you just did like a promotional script for me, Sheila. Can I like copy that?
I'm
Sheila,
going to be helping you craft that story, Jamuna.
Sheila, in our group today, especially in our Zoom session today, and also there are several people watching us live. But today we have a lot of speakers, trainers, and coaches. I think a lot of familiar faces to you. Could you give them that one key point about storytelling as a trainer, as a facilitator, as a coach that will relate more to them? Yeah.
I think as a trainer, first of all, you need to be willing to be very transparent. We're not saying that you need to share all the most intimate details of your life, but you need to be that person where when you go up there, what people see is what you see is what you get. There should be no barriers between you and the rest of your audience. Now, I'm going to share something very personal with you here because I want to practice what I preach. There was a time when, I went into a training program and I shared a story that was very personal to me. And I think, Jamuna, you know what I've been through in the past 2 years. For those who are listening, I am very transparent. I'm not trying to get sympathy, but all I'm saying is that about 2 years ago, 1.5 years ago, I lost my husband to cancer after a 9-month fight. And that whole process taught me a lot of things. It taught me about how you need to look at the positive in all the negative that's happening. So when I go to a session and I talk to people about reframing, you go into trainings, yeah, and you have a lot of people whinging and complaining about the company, the organization and all that, never looking for the silver lining, never looking for the positive of what they have. So what I do is I pivot them and I tell them about my story. I tell them that if you can find a positive takeaway from the horror of being through what I've been through in past 2 years, then I tell you, if I can do that, you can do that. And they get it straight away. They get it straight away. And a lot of them they connect with me emotionally. And at that point in time, they get into rapport with me. Now, so as a trainer, you need to be willing to share stories, personal stories that have helped you to grow. Share it with your audience. And I tell you, that's what authenticity and sincerity is about. And people will really appreciate that, because then you are not having a division and saying, oh, I'm the trainer, I have to be on a pedestal here, and I have to be the smart, wise one, and, I need to be a certain way. No, I don't see myself as a trainer. I don't really like the word even, Jamuna, but because the industry uses it. For me, a trainer is like the person who gets the animals to run through a hoop in a circus, right? I would like to call myself more as a facilitator of learning, a sharer of knowledge, that's it. So that's what I have to say. Tell stories. I tell a lot of stories, and I notice, because I use my sharp observation skills. When I have finished with a story, whether it's a personal story or a metaphor or something I've adapted, for example, when some people said to me, what difference does it make, if you go out there and help one person? And I use the starfish story. You all know the starfish story. For those of you who don't know the starfish story, well, it's available. I don't know if we have time now to tell you the starfish story, but I tell them the starfish story and I say how, every little thing you do might not make a difference to changing the world, might not bring about world peace, but it can change the life of one person. And that's what doing good is about, one person at a time. And people straight away get it, right? So I tell lots of stories. I might even take a story of yours, Jamuna. I might go out there and say, hey, everybody can learn how to do social media and sell on social media. Now, my friend Jamuna Karmehan, this is what she did. And I could use your story and share it. And of course, if I'm going to use a personal story, because I'm also a coach, I'm also an NLP trainer, and I've seen lots of change happen in my trainings, where people come with all kinds of illnesses and diseases and back pain and skin problems, and voila, within a matter of 1 week, it's all gone. It's like a miracle. People don't believe. So I ask the people whose stories I'm sharing whether I can share their stories. Share stories.
All right. Sheila, yeah, I have to say this at this point of time. Meanwhile, for those of you, right, if you have any question, just post it, because I'm monitoring the Facebook Live as well as our Zoom closed group here, and I will, ask Sheila. I have to agree with what Sheila said, because I was like that as a trainer. I was like, okay, I have to be very prim and proper. I cannot let people know
I
about
remember.
my hardship or my problem. But this online presence, I started telling stories that how, as a working mother, working on my own and managing my kids, and that's when I found that I relate to a lot of women and parents. So that's how you relate, when you admit that sometimes you are vulnerable, but how you
Yes,
come out of that, Sheila.
yes.
Sheila, you are saying the key word you say is that tell stories, tell stories. So now, how do we prepare to tell stories? When some people naturally, like you have a great wealth of experience. How do we prepare to tell stories? How do we,
Hmm.
do we have a bang
Yeah,
for us?
that's a good question. Yes, you need to have a bank of stories. You need to be collecting stories. Every time you come across a great story on Facebook, or, a book, or through history, or in the newspaper, or somebody tells you a story, or you come across a story like the Starfish Story, collect it, put it into a repository. All right? Start collecting your stories. If it's other people's stories, just say, hey, do you mind? That's a fantastic story that you made up. Can I use your story in my meeting or my training? Because it's really going to help me connect. And I'm sure people are not going to say, oh, no, cannot. My story is very private, because if it is, then you wouldn't be telling. Right. So the first thing that you want to be able to do in storytelling is, whenever you are going to tell a story, you need to know your audience. You don't go and tell a fairy tale story to a bunch of high-powered CEOs or business people where that story has got nothing to do with their context. Okay, so you need to know your audience first. Who are you going to be telling the story, and in what context? Are you doing a sales pitch? Are you, and there's no reason why you're doing a sales pitch you can't use a story. Okay, you can, are you going to influence the board members, for example, to give you a budget to do something else, or get permission to do something else? Are you selling something? So know your context and know your audience. And then you need to find a story that your audience can relate to. If you talk above the audience, if you're going to give a corporate story to a bunch of university graduates, or young teenagers, it goes above their head. So it needs to be a story which, in they say in Malay, sepadan, it's got to be connected, right? Then your story must be short. Now, earlier on you said, Jamuna, people think that telling stories means long-winded and all that. Yeah, so you don't want your story to be a Hindi movie. Okay, like a 2.5 hour thing going on, and the whole presentation's about your story, and people are like, what's this going round the mulberry bush? I don't get it. So your story must be very succinct. It must be short. Not more than 3 minutes per story. Not more than 3 minutes per story. Anything else, people zone out. Especially if we're doing it online. They're like, get to the point quickly. We're running out of time. Okay? So at the higher up the level that you are talking to, seriously, the shorter your story needs to be. Okay, because these people, they give you like 15 minutes for a presentation, right?
Yeah.
Then your story must have a clear purpose. Don't saja go and tell a story there because you think, it's good to have a story in this. So just throw a story which has got nothing to do with anything. Your story must have a purpose. What is the story? Is it to introduce an idea, to plant a seed, to send a message, to help people understand, to help people take action about something? And you need to be able to write that story idea in one sentence. If your story idea is one paragraph with 5 sentences, then you've lost the plot. Okay? So the next thing is, it should be in a nice sequence. Of course, if your story is just one dull, boring, flat story, there's no drama, no kind of like suspense a little bit, then of course people will go like, what was that all about? So this is where you don't just tell the story. You got to use your facial expression. You got to use your voice. There are times in the story when you want to slow down and pause. And there are times in the story when you want to go a bit faster and build up the excitement. So this is where you need a bit of that dramatic flair lah. Don't have? Never mind, go and learn. Okay, go and learn. Watch people YouTube videos to learn how to use your body and your voice. If possible, make the story specific. Have characters. The characters can be people. You can make the character a rock. You can make a pot as a character. You can make an animal, but be sensible to culture. For example, there are certain animals you don't want to be using in a story in Malaysia where there are cultural sensitivities. And I would say don't use a story of the long, slithery creature because there are some people who have phobias. All right? So be careful. Be a bit sensitive. And the story must have sensory data. So I give you an example, Jamuna.
All right.
If I say to you, okay, the audience clapped after his presentation. Okay, yawn. Good lah. So what does it say? If I tell you this, there was pin drop silence when he finished. Then the audience broke into thunderous applause, their face wreathed in huge smiles of agreement. What was the difference? It was the same thing. Which did you prefer?
The second one.
Obviously, why?
It's like, I was like that, you know, and then, oh. So
you could picture it.
Emotion. Yeah, I could visualize it and then I'm like, okay, what's next?
Yes, so you connected with that emotionally. So the language, that's why you need to have sensory images there. If you're talking about food, describe it, talk about it, the taste, the smell and all that. If you're talking about investing, bring up a story of someone who, was skeptical and then he came in, he invested, and after 3 months he saw this and oh my God, he was so convinced. These are the characters that you introduce are important. So sensory data. Then your story must be authentic lah. You can borrow other people's story, but don't claim it as your own. So if you came back and said to me, Sheila, when I was in India, I had this amazing experience, right? So when I tell the story, and if I go and tell people, everybody, when I went to India, I had this amazing experience, and it's not my story, it's going to come through. But if I went and told my audience, I want to tell you a story about my friend Jamuna, who was in India, and she had this extraordinary experience. So then it comes across as authentic. So don't blah, take somebody else's story and then, or some general story that's out there in the public domain, you take it and then you find it. I want to tell you about the time I was walking on the beach and I saw this boy throwing starfish. Don't make it like that, okay? So, yeah, all right. And you can tell a story which expresses your fear, your dejection and all that. But you cannot end on that note. And so, I left that time in my life when I was really depressed. And you leave it like that. You leave your audience there. You must say, but I picked myself up with the friends that I had around me. They walked beside me as I walked on this lonely, dark road. The beacons of light were my friends beckoning me on at the side, cheering me on. And that is the reason why we need to invest in relationship. You know what I'm saying? So you need to end on an inspiring note. And I already talked about when you tell the story alone, the words alone are not the main event. It's also you. It's that whole package deal. How passionate you are about the story. Okay, all of that must come together to create this powerful story.
Sheila, even looking at you now, right? Imagine, I'm not sure whether you're off the chair or are you still on the chair. You are like already coming in front to the screen. So I could only imagine if I give you a stage and you'd be like roaming around the stage. So that's the thing. So imagine if you tell the same story like this. So I was walking down, I'm excited. And how would people interpret that, right?
Are you gonna I think there will be people who would already have left this. People who had already left this the session that we're having and gone off and saying, oh my God, she's talking about storytelling and look at her, she's just sitting down there. So Jamuna, the purpose of stories today to convince people and connect with their emotions. How impactful is that? That's why you need to believe in that story. Don't ever tell a story you don't believe in. Okay.
Sheila, I was in a session. Sorry to interrupt you. I was in a session, and this facilitator, he had a kind intention of teaching us about building rapport. However, he just couldn't build rapport himself, but he was talking about tips on building rapport. So I felt like, okay, something is lacking. So yeah, that's the thing. All right, now I'm the golden question here is that Sheila, you've said everything. You gave a lot of tips. When are you conducting your session to teach us about storytelling? And we are ready, we would like to learn, because as you know, a lot of us are investing to learn about virtual, to learn about digital marketing. Now this will come in very nicely, blend in very nicely with this whole portal. So when is your next program?
When is my next program?
There, I
Okay,
got you there.
there, you got me there. It's really soon. I'm actually doing a prototype of the program already with a bunch of my colleagues and teams. I think you know about that, Jamuna. You're
Yeah.
sitting in on that program, and you know me. I'm pretty tough. I will push you until you get it. So that prototype is already. We are already in session 2. So we're looking at 3 or 4 sessions depending on how far we want to take this. So I am saying that we will be ready for it in about 2 to 3 weeks. Probably we are
Excellent.
looking at the first week of July. We'll be able to do it. And I think, Jamuna, I'm going to ask you to tell them more about this because,
I will. I'm actually sitting in very privileged to be in Sheila's pilot program. And she doesn't treat it as a pilot program. It's like as though I'm like a fully paid person. We have assignments, and just in the first day itself, that I'm learning so much about storytelling. I always learn a lot from her, but this is amazing. All right, so we have about 10 5-10 minutes here, 15 minutes. And Pertapal Singh said in the chat box that great stuff, Sheila. As Steven Spielberg said, I always like to think of the audience when I am directing, because I am the audience.
absolutely. You need to, that it's called empathy actually, because if you're just going to create stories for yourself, and there are people who do that. Sometimes you read something in the newspaper or magazine and you think, well, this person like shocks and theory only, just a story, nobody gets it. You know what I mean? But it needs to be something that people can connect with. That's why anything, whether you're making a movie, telling a story in a training, at a presentation or anything, you need to start with the purpose. Who is my audience and what is the purpose of that story that I want to incorporate?
Sheila, the word that you mentioned, shock sendiri, this is what I get from people. They're like, Jamuna, I can't share that, on my online, on my social media feed. Then you look like as though I'm boasting and I'm bragging about myself. And I say, no, you're actually adding value. You're sharing your experience. So how do we differentiate? Probably the last question, right? How do you differentiate, like, bragging, boasting, shock sendiri to, hey, I'm just sharing my experience. What's the differentiation here?
Okay, so it again comes back to purpose. Are you putting that out there on social media just to have people look at you and say how great you are and how fantastic you are and what a wonderful person you are? Now, Chamuna, I told you when you got named as one of the 100 LinkedIn icons, I said, use that for marketing. And it's not like, I was one of the 100 icons because I put in a lot of work. So I became, y'all also can. But what you did was you said, I am so amazed that I got, no, I'm so honored. I'm so humbled by this. And I just am so amazed by it. And that humility came forth, that you were talking about it because it is an accolade that you want to talk about. Listen, you can't do business and not promote yourself. That's ridiculous. You need to promote yourself and what you do, but you can do it through a story. I think today in this platform, Jamina, you and I have in a way promoted what we do. But has there been any element of boasting about it? It's not, it's sharing. So I say share those stories in an authentic, humble, and and a place that's coming from integrity and congruence. When you blow your trumpet, people know lah. No, because it's all about you. But what is this fame? What is this achievement that I have in the scheme of what I can give back to society, to people? Now, I'll give you an example. I talked to you earlier about my 2 years of having to look after a nurse, be a caregiver for a person who was terminally ill, and then losing him. And what I did was I wrote a lot of things, as they say, Malay meluahkan perasaan. I did it on Facebook because it was cathartic. Because and some people said, why are you bearing your soul? I said, no, but there was so many people who came and said, Sheila, I had a really bad start to the day. And then I saw your posting and I said, oh my God, if she can have that positive attitude about life, what's my excuse? And I totally began to be grateful. And I said, okay, so all of that is for a purpose, right? So tell the story about yourself from a place of humility, from a place of showing where you were nothing and then you have grown. And the story is not about you. The story is about, I took that journey and I got here, and so can you. You know what I'm saying? So it's that, what do you want them to connect emotionally with? Because when you start talking too much about yourself, no one wants to connect with you.
I have someone in Facebook say that they're driving, listening to our conversation, and I think she or he got hooked by it, so they're still listening. So you're a great storyteller. All right. Yeah, thank you. For the comments from the floor. All right. So we are right on time. So Sheila, there are a lot of things that you spoke. This session was like a storytelling session, and that was our purpose. And a few keywords that I picked up for today will be authentic,
Yes.
be humble, have a purpose, and
Mm-hmm.
another one is that for online purpose of storytelling, keep it to 3 minutes. All right, keep it for, yeah. Is that?
Yeah, I think online 3 minutes, even if it's face to face, because when you're going in to see a group of people, there is always a purpose, right? They're there to learn something, receive something. But if your whole session is going to be a story, there are some people who do that very well. The whole session, there was one person called Milton Erickson. Dr. Milton Erickson was one of the foremost hypnotherapists, and he was a psychiatrist. He could just go into a coaching session and just tell a story, a metaphoric story, and the person would just get it straight away. Now, all of us are not as skilled as that. But there is something someone posted here. I think it was Pripal Singh who said, story doesn't have to be real to be effective. What's your thought on that statement? Yeah, it doesn't have to be real. It doesn't have to be me in the story or you in the story. I mean, the story about the starfish and the old man, it's an urban legend story. But a lot of people resonate with that. So there are a lot of stories, even fairy tales. Why do the stories of Aesop's fables and Grimm's fairy tales, you just tell a young child who's, today now we've got this Black Matters issue going on, and there are so many people out there who are very tan with dark skin who have said that throughout their lives they've been sidelined, not only in Africa, in America, but also in Malaysia and around the world. But if you were to tell a child like that the story of the ugly duckling, and you could turn it into the story of an ugly duckling that was black. You could, adapt it a little bit and say how it grew into this beautiful black swan that was so unique that in a pond of white swans, it stood out simply because of its color that made it so different and unique and elegant. And you think you tell that story to a small child, he goes away from there happy and goes and tells his little friend, I am unique. I'm going to grow up to be special, not like you, So it's about the context. So it doesn't have to be a real story. You can use any story anywhere. But the key thing here is that it has to relate to that audience. It has to be relevant to that context.
Thank you, Sheila. I'm spellbounded, I'm like listening. You know how I like to listen. I put on a student mode whenever you are speaking. So I guess there are no further questions. So we could thank you, Dr. YKK, for your fairy tales. I think maybe a last question. I've been creating on my own fairy tales to my children and now my grandchildren. I'm now sharing my experience through my new book, Hi Dad, Create Origin for Your Kids. Any advice, Sheila? So you're going to advise Dr. YKK on his book that's about to launch.
I have no advice to give you, Doctor. You're writing a book on fairy tales. You're a brave man, and I know it's going to turn out to be really good. I'm looking forward to it. Don't forget to invite me for that launch. But the thing is that sometimes when you tell the story, you shouldn't need to explain the moral of the story. Then it becomes too in your face. Sometimes the best things about some of these stories and metaphors you tell is you just throw it out there, because different people who read will identify. I do this exercise in my trainings. I have a video of a cracked pot. This is the story of a cracked pot, and there are very different interesting characters in that video. There are a few other pots, there are flowers, there's a man who transports these pots, and I always play that video and I ask my audience, who do you identify with? Some of them will sit there and say, oh, we are the uncracked pot lah. We are very useful now. That I'm like, okay. Some people say I'm the cracked pot. Some people say I'm the flowers. Some people say I'm the cart. It's very, very interesting how people see themselves in the stories that you're telling. And that's it. If people can resonate with the story, if it's relevant to them. If you're telling a story that's not relevant to somebody, it's your story, no one can resonate with it. They're not going to connect. So I think your fairy tales, children have no filters. Okay, we get filters as we grow older. So the younger they are, the less filters they have. They will take your story. One day they will identify with this character. One day they will identify, depends on their context, their milieu they're in at that point. So children are really, really great to tell stories to, because they don't censor, filter. What is this about? About that? How come that one? They don't know all that. They just accept the story, spell down. Listen to, look, watch a bunch of kids. Who someone's telling a story to them, look at the way their expressions. Now, if you can get that kind of expression from a room full of adults whom you are training or talking to, you got it, Pat.
Well, you always do that, Sheila, to us, and we were like, waiting for you to, with the big, big eyes. All right, okay. Sheila, I think we should conclude now. All right, so I'm like supposed to be the host, and I'm always, thinking of the questions to ask. But as usual, I'm like listening to what you have to say. So it's been an awesome, pleasant session having you here, Sheila. And you are like so, engaging. And when
Thank
are you
you.
launching your story line or your book?
I am actually.
I got you twice today.
Okay, that's been a question that so many people have been asking me. And then I've got my good friend Frida Liu, who's written so many books, and she's been scolding me. And my other friend Sumitra Selvaraj, who writes, stories about saris, and she's also been pushing me. And then I've got my, colleague also who's helping me work on that. So what happened was sometime early last year, about 3 or 4 months after my husband passed away, people kept telling me those Facebook postings that you have put in all the lessons. So I wrote a series called Lessons, from KP Warren, my husband, my late husband. And so they all were very uplifted by that and said, those are amazing stories. You should put it into a book. I'm like, okay. So the book is in progress, Jamuna. It's halfway done. Layout is there. Artwork has been done. I just need to find the time to finish it. It's called Lessons from an Eagle, because my husband always identified himself as an eagle who soars above the rest and doesn't sit on the ground and peck with the rest of the crows and the hens, but he's always soaring high above the rest. So that's the title. Lessons from an Eagle should be coming out when it comes out, sometime this year.
Lessons from the Eagle, and that will be our wrap up for today. Very proper. Thank you so much, Sheila. There are some questions coming in, but probably like Andal and Noor Zaima, you could always text Sheila. Her Facebook is Sheila Singam. Company is Human Equation, or you can keep, contact me and I'll channel your questions to her. So thank you so much for being here, Sheila. Wish you all the best, and we are waiting to get your autograph soon for the book.
Yes, thank you, Jamna. You'll be invited. Don't worry. Thank you. It's been an honor to be here on your platform today. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Bye-bye. See you guys soon.